Not that it wasn't already. I think the introductory press conference and all the hoopla of Pat McAfee made it very, very clear this is now a blast from the past. This is a return to another era of Rich Rodriguez leading the West Virginia Mountaineers. But if it wasn't already, it now is official. This is now officially the second tenure of Rich Rodriguez, the Neil Brown chapter, the 2024 season, the last 6 years, no matter what you think of them. That is all over. That book has been closed, and that ended with almost an embodiment of the tenure, where there were some great moments, there were some really bad moments, there were some big plays, there were some blunders. It ended with chaos, and chaos that didn't go the way of the West Virginia Mountaineers, and they do lose as West Virginia lost their Frisco Bowl game to number 25 Memphis. Memphis is going to stay in the rankings. They lost, probably would have bumped them out. West Virginia ends the year with a losing record, 6-7. The loss doesn't go against Neil Brown, but they do end the season 6-7. And we are going to talk about our takeaways from that game, but also now moving forward to this Rich Rodriguez era and how this roster is going to look. How many of those players from that game do we even think he's going to want to keep? He was talking with Jaheim White, Rodney Gallagher, some of those players after the game, what that may look like moving forward, because it's definitely not going to be 100% of the eligibility of that roster. And he's definitely going to be looking into the portal and changing some things for sure. Mike Asti, Cody Nespor here, Mountaineer Report. WVU Sports Now is our coverage. Make sure to find us everywhere you get your podcasts. Download, subscribe. Also, you can watch us on YouTube. So, Cody, before we fully get to the roster and the Rich Rod era, any takeaways from the bowl game loss? It kind of was that embodiment of the Neil Brown era. As I said, they did lose. Weird Kenny Pickett rule kind of screwed them at the end, where they would have recovered a fumble after the interception, another errant throw from Green, but they end up not getting lucky enough to do that. A slow start. They then got going in the second half, too little, too late. Hudson Clement drops what would have been a touchdown that could have gave them over 200 yards. They score anyway, but Jaheim White gets hurt. It was just a wild Tuesday night that didn't even kick off until 9 p.m. Eastern time.
Yeah, didn't kick off till 9:10.
9:10. I'm so sorry. Yeah, a college basketball game had to finish before that, and then it got to the football game, and they did delay it to officially start for the TV audience. So yes, 9:10 to be technical. Didn't really end. My coverage didn't end until 1:30 in the morning. So yeah, even Central Time, 8:10.
Yeah. I mean, what I don't know what you would take away from that matters going forward.
I guess,
like you said, it was a typical West Virginia game. They didn't play any defense. I thought Garrett Green, might have been his best game of the year.
The numbers say that. I think he had a slow start. I don't think he played as well as the numbers say, but when I was writing that, the numbers are legit. Almost 330 yards, a completion percentage of 73% when he never got close to that in any game besides the FCS game. Ran for almost 100, 3 TDs. The interceptions way at the end. Didn't really make a horrible turnover earlier in the game, obviously, despite some errant throws. So overall, his numbers were there, but yeah, they didn't get the win, and it felt like he could have done more even.
Yeah, I wish... if they could have scored on that last drive, that would have been such a great ending for Garrett. A guy who kind of deserves it, right?
And Chad Scott would have been cool to get a win.
Chad Scott, like Garrett, of all the players that come into West Virginia, just a guy that, learned to love it here, learned to embrace it here. Has been very vocal the last couple of weeks about how much he loves it here, how glad he is he came,
so almost repeating himself continuously.
So I think a game-winning drive like that would have been awesome for him. Doesn't really change anything about his I guess legacy. Goofy last play I think is kind of the perfect cap for this era.
10 all-time quarterback passing yards for West Virginia football history, which there's been a lot of great quarterbacks. There's been some great seasons, and he's top 10 when his best years at Duke's Mayo Bowl. The other ones have had better years in terms of what the team did. So that's something to add. Also a lot of rushing yards. I think he's definitely going to go down as a competitor. As he said, he's going to go down as somebody who played as you-know-what off, as he said he wants to go down as in terms of what fans remember him for. I think he's always going to be attached to Neil Brown, which will be a negative for a lot of fans. I think he'll be somebody that he stayed with the program all the way through. backup over transfers, didn't complain, didn't leave. We already are seeing a continuous backup transfer going to a third program with Ryder Burton. Garrett Green did not do that. He stayed the course. He eventually got to start multiple years. He did win a bowl game that he was the starter in, and did complete a 9-win season that at the time saved Neil Brown's job. This year didn't go nearly well enough, and I he knows it. If you even listen to him when he kept saying it's not good enough, I think he knows he partly got Neil Brown fired. Like, I don't want to put that on him, but the whole offseason was he got to be more careful. He got to bring the completion percentage up. He can't throw the turnovers. He can't throw the interceptions. He can't have the turnovers. And the 2023 Garrett Green probably would have had this team win 8 games, and Brown might still be there. But we saw the worst of Garrett Green, or at least worse than the year earlier, and his regression as the quarterback, it's the most important position, led to his coach that he loves so much being fired in this new era. That's just the truth of it. I think he knows that. I think Brown knows that. But they are married to each other, and he's a competitor. I think Mountaineer fans liked watching him. I even still see people saying, he wasn't good enough for me. I'd rather win more, but he's one of the most fun players I've ever watched. It's similar to watching Brett Favre. You just don't know what you're going to get. But he never gave you the high, obviously, that Favre could. And maybe, people will forever debate whether he should have started earlier, whether he ever was legit enough for the Big 12. Maybe they max it out in 2023, etc. But now that is over, and yeah, that game kind of felt a little bit like the Neil Brown era, even though he wasn't the coach. Saw Memphis's tweet; they're kind of poking fun at Brown's comment, which was funny because he didn't get the L for that game. So I don't know if he was watching or not. It was also interesting. The players showed up with the Neil Breezy shirts. Like a lot of them were attached to Brown. Did you read anything into that in terms of maybe some players that do have eligibility left that Rich Rod would want to keep, that are trying to set? Some people reading it into that's a subtle message that they are upset about the situation. I think that might be reading into it a bit much, but what did you read that as?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that's like a big message like, hey, we oppose this or something.
Right.
I just think that shows like, I mean, the truth of it is like, these guys were here because of Neil Brown, right? Like, it's not like a lot of these guys grew up West Virginia fans dreaming of coming here. They came here for Neil Brown. They obviously liked him. I think they were just showing support. And I agree with you. Like, I don't think this was some grand message to the university or something. Like, I think they're just supporting their guy. Like, I think you always have, even, people that work normal jobs, you have an affinity for the boss that hires you, right? If they bring you in, if you have a good relationship, you don't want to see them get fired. It's kind of the similar thing. But no, I wouldn't read into it too much other than just, they liked Neil. A lot of people liked Neil.
I don't know anyone who doesn't like Neil in terms of as a person. Really, I really don't know. I mean, obviously there's some fans who hate him because he didn't win enough. But in terms of as a person, I don't think there's anyone who didn't like Neil, doesn't like Neil, didn't like being around Neil. And whether it's professional, personal, or football, he was their mentor. And when you look at the age difference, even though he's still a young coach, maybe he was a father figure to some of them. Certainly a guy like Eddie V, who's all across the world. Neil Brown probably was his American father. And I mean, that probably is the case. So there probably is some emotional affinity there. That doesn't mean they're going to go wherever Neil Brown ends up. That doesn't mean they're even going to leave. That doesn't mean they were flipping off Rich Rod. That doesn't mean any message was being sent for me. I mean, we can't ask them. They're the only ones who know. But that, I didn't read that much into it. I thought it was a cool gesture. I think it was a way to respect somebody who did bring them in, even if they have more success with Rich Rod as a team. I don't think they want to disrespect Neil Brown, so they were just trying to do it almost as a tribute to him, and also to be fair, to make him maybe, send a message to him wherever he is, wherever he was watching the game, if he was watching, that if we do win this, because it was before the game, this will be your win, even though it would go for Chad Scott. It was his team. I mean, people are trying to connect it as he lost the game. So before the game, they were trying to say, this could be for you, and the comeback maybe attempt could be for you, but they didn't win, and the loss doesn't go to Neil Brown, but it does go to Chad Scott as an interim. And nonetheless, that is over. That chapter is now over. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, WV Sports Now. But the takeaways from the game obviously are meaningless really to this next era. It just closes this season in this chapter, especially when you're getting a new head coach. But with the way the world works these days, there were many players that performed that have eligibility remaining. And people are now talking about which Mountaineers they would like Rich Rod to maybe try to retain. It's not going to be the full roster. Many former players have said this vocally. McAfee has said this vocally. Not every one of these players can even handle the Rich Rod culture. He's going to work them harder than they were worked under Neil Brown. They may or may not win more. You would hope they would win more, but they're going to flat be worked harder. So not every player is going to fit into that, and that's just the situation. And his system's different. His plays are different. Everything's different. There's going to be changes. He's going to go in the portal like every other coach would normally. But some, just because you need to fill out the numbers, he can't bring in 100%, and you're running out of time here. We're almost done with the year. We're at the end of December. If you're a good player, I could see Rich Rod trying to do something with you. He was talking to Jaheim White, Rodney Gallagher, Hudson Clement, those players that have eligibility left. Rodney Gallagher is one that kind of everyone feels is probably going to leave. He was really attached with Neil Brown and almost decommitted even before signing to Penn State. They still need a wideout. They're still interested in him from what I've been hearing with PSU sources. But it looks like maybe there's an effort from Rich Rod to try to keep some of those players. So before we fully get into the most important position, which everyone's talking about, quarterback, because we didn't see too much interaction of Rich Rod and Nico, and some are debating whether or not he would fit or not and whether that would work or not. But other top QBs out of the portal are now off the board based on their commitments. Are there any players that you would like to see Rich Rod keep that you think would make sense for more of a spread offense, Rich Rod 2025 offense that were there before, that are good enough to carry over into a tenure that is going to expect a lot more winning, that he's talking about trying to win a national title? Like, are there players that you think can be contributors on a team that could get to that level, because that is now clearly the goal?
Yeah. I think certainly a lot of the scope players have a lot of promise, a lot of the young guys. CJ, Jaheim, Traylon Ray, Rodney, Justin Robinson. I don't remember. I think Jaden Bray has 1 year left.
Yeah, he got hurt. We basically hardly saw him this past season. Yeah.
So like a lot of the scope players, are productive guys.
Yeah.
The underclassmen are promising. Hudson Clement, don't want to. I miss him.
Right.
He's probably the best of the group.
And he take his game, obviously.
Yeah. Defensively, I mean, like Trey Lathan, after him, like
it would have been Trotter, but he's committed to Missouri.
Yeah, Trotter's Trotter. So like defense is just going to be a wash, I think. Like if you keep some of the really young guys who haven't even played, it's like.
Yeah. Gardner Hollis had his best game of the season. He had a couple plays. I don't know where those were.
Still gave up a few though.
He did, definitely. but generally speaking, he had games where he gave up a few and there was no positive play. I can remember about a couple positive plays in that game. His name was on the broadcast. Yeah.
The problem is though, like, I'm naming all the guys that are productive. It's like, with NIL, like they're going to be the hardest guys to keep because like. I don't know.
You have to pay them. You have to pay players you're bringing in. Rich Rod's going to want to sprinkle in some Jack State players, even if not all the roster, obviously. So even though there's more money now and McAfee and Kendrick are fun to get more, and the projection is it'll get higher, as you're saying, it's not like it's an unlimited cap here. This isn't the New York Yankees. There's going to be so much money to give out. So how much are you allocating to the current players versus who Rich Rod thinks are truly Rich Rod guys that he can get in the portal? Because even off last year, 2023, Traylon Ray, at the time, Garrett Green, Cole Taylor for one more ride, Jaheim White even after only a freshman season, they all were paid more money to do it one more time. So if Jaheim White's coming back again, he's going to get more money. Would Rich Rod rather go get his guy for the same money or maybe even cheaper? That is something to consider. Or if you give all of those guys money on the current roster, how much do you have left to go into the portal? Because you need more. And as much as I think he will like some of those guys I've talked, I think he'll really see a lot of Steve Slayton and Jaheim White. I think he'll really like him. I think Traylon Ray getting hurt and having a year of rehab, if I was advising him as a friend or somebody in his camp, I would say it's a big risk to go to another program. I mean, he's going to be – this might make sense to come back to what still could be a good program because you are rehabbing, whereas if you were healthy, that might be different. The offensive line, he got to keep some of them. So how many skill position guys are you going to keep? It's mostly going to change, but any of those guys with eligibility who's been around, he's going to try to keep some of them because – You just don't want to start completely from scratch.
Yeah.
Same thing D-line wise. But there's going to be players, too, that he's going to sit down with. He kind of even alluded to it when he talked to ESPN on the broadcast. And as any coach in America, people look at the portal and say, well, these guys are screwing over programs. There's the other side of it that Neil was even open with us talking about, that there are times where you sit down with a player and say it's best for you and me that you transfer. You're basically releasing them as if it's the NFL. And Rich Rod's going to make some of those decisions, too. Because somebody like Eddie V, who got hurt and now is going to have a whole nother year of eligibility that Neil talked about, will be back. He wanted to come back. He told me he wants to come back. He said that publicly. Rich Rod may sit down and say, you're not good enough for me. I'm sorry. You're not coming back here. Or maybe I'm giving that money elsewhere. Those hard decisions will exist. So it definitely won't be the same roster, but you would imagine some of those skill position players would be back. Hudson Clement, though, to bring him up for a second, because he was the real impact player in the game. Without him, they wouldn't have even had a chance, despite his drop TD. He went from no scholarship to scholarship. He went to become the number one receiver at West Virginia, but it was a 6-6 team. How good do you think he really is that if, hypothetically, Rich Rod gets the team going into a winner, which can happen in a year turnaround, even though that's not guaranteed at all, how much impact can he have and where can he fit? Is he really a number one on an actual contender, or is he only a number one because he was at West Virginia where they were an average team? If they're winning, do you think Rich Rod, who clearly has pressure to win a conference title, etc., is going to see him as a one or see him as more of a 2 or 3 where you can be on the team, but there won't be as many looks? The guy he has chemistry with in Green obviously won't be there.
Yeah. I think Hudson's extremely talented. I don't think it was a case of he's the best receiver on a bad team.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at, yeah.
If you look at his first touchdown catch in the bowl game was spectacular. Like, how many players in the Big 12, let's say, make a catch like that?
Okay. Yeah.
I less than a dozen, I would assume.
Yeah. I mean, he's made some great plays. He's had some drops, though, that shouldn't be drops as a number one. But yeah.
So, but it's like, I don't think he was. It was never a situation where it's like he's the best receiver on this team, so he gets 10 targets and the other guys get 2.
Okay.
Right? I think he's always produced on 5 or 6 targets a game. He makes 3 or 4 catches and they're big plays. He breaks a bunch of tackles. Like I said, that first touchdown was a spectacular kind of acrobatic catch and to fall down in the end zone. And so, I think he's extremely talented. I think, could he be a number one on a contender? I don't know. I mean, it's hard. It depends how good the rest of the team around him is.
Yeah, it's hard to project. Obviously, we don't know how the roster is going to look. It's also a lot to say they're even going to be contender next year, despite Rich Rod being there. Even McAfee's publicly said it's more like year 2 where you're really going to be focusing in on this. As you've noticed, he's starting to pivot into more reality of the projection of what actually to expect next year. So he already said 2 years in is where you really look. Where next year you just take whatever you can get. Hopefully, a winning team. That was kind of paraphrasing what he said the other day. So with that in mind, Hudson Clement is a player that has more than 1 year of eligibility. So if that's your thinking, he has 2 years left. At that point, he would be a senior with tons of experience. Maybe you get a 7-8 win bowl win season next year, which I think is reasonably what you're looking for with Rich Rod. It obviously can't go 6-6 again. And then you'd have a vet with multiple cultures who would probably be the room leader, even if he's not the true one. And then your offense should even be better because you have a lot more experience. You basically would get where you were supposed to have this year off experience, which is why people were so mad that this team didn't win, because they were more experienced with likely a better coach and a better system that fits them, and maybe a schedule that's a little bit more conducive, at least next year. That might be another selling point. But I mean, I don't know how much you're going to pay him to make it happen. I don't know what his value is around the country. I do think another feather in the cap of Hudson Clement that would make Rich Rod like him. And I don't think he'd be a 1 necessarily if Rich Rod actually brings a contender in, maybe on an average Rich Rod team. I think he's more of a 2, but I think Rich Rod would like him as a 2 because he's not afraid to go through the middle. He will take a hit for a first down through the middle, whereas a number 1 you're going to bring in off NIL money that maybe is a thing is not going to want to do that. I think the ideal pairing would, if Traylon Ray can really step up his game and be his peak. I think Traylon Ray could be a number 1 as a deep threat guy if he gets healthy and another year under him. maybe he's the outside guy and Clement just does all the dirty work and the numbers look the same. Maybe there's not even really a 1-2. That's just who's on the current roster. Obviously, they may go elsewhere. I mean, to be fair, and it's not like I'm asking Rich Rod to get the number one transfer players in the country. Neil Brown last year got Justin Robinson and Jaden Bray. They were major conference transfers that other programs wanted. They didn't get it done enough this year. Certainly Jaden Bray getting hurt. But even if you get those type of guys, maybe that can be okay if they're healthy and if the offense is better and if the system works more. But I think Hudson Clement, personality-wise, I think Rich Rod will like him. I think he can be hard edge. I'll give you that for the fans for sure here. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti, WVU Sports Now, Mountaineer Report. Now, I do want to close up this edition of the show, and we're going to talk a lot more about the roster, about portal, about what it's going to look like. Even if while you're watching this and listening to this, maybe some of these players have dipped out because there's no telling when that's going to occur, even though there's been a bit of a calm here the next day after the bowl game as we're recording this on Wednesday when that bowl game was on a Tuesday. But the most important position that none of this matters, and Rich Rod will not have a chance to take a step or contend if this position doesn't click, and that is QB. The reason why he was close to a natty in his first tenure was because Pat White became one of the best quarterbacks in college football history. Even at Jack State, he was able to develop that position, and then we saw the success there. He didn't get a quarterback in Michigan, which is why it's so bad. He failed and swung and missed, and bringing in Terrell Pryor, who went to Ohio State instead. When he has a QB, he can win. When he doesn't have a QB, he doesn't win. Like any other coach in the country. Nico has experience now. He has won. He has 4 wins under his belt that people bring up. I mean, I'm not a wins as a quarterback stat guy. I don't think wins is a QB stat. So I think they won some of those games in spite of him, but he has been winning. I don't know if he really fits in with the Rich Rod thing. I don't think he's fast enough. I don't think he can get by defenders as much as QBs Rich Rod would like to run this offense. His arm is better than it was. He's more accurate than, say, Green was. Doesn't make as many mistakes. But there are QBs out there in the portal. Now, some have already committed. Liberty's QB that many people thought would be perfect for Rich Rod. I just saw he committed elsewhere today to Colorado and Dion to replace George Sanders. That's a hit, putting him in the Big 12. That would have been a guy that fit perfectly with Rich Rod, but that doesn't feel like that's going to happen now, and you'd imagine they're paying him more than WVU could. So where are you on if Nico is good enough to be the guy on a team that has pressure to contend for a Big 12 title? Do you think he fits with Rich Rod, knowing what the Rich Rod system is, which is different than Neil Brown's, certainly different than Neil Brown's, or do they just have to go in the portal and try to find somewhere else to at least compete with Nico, or they just don't have a chance next year? Where are you on the QB debate on what Rich Rod should do?
Yeah. I think we've seen, this sort of foundation with Nico.
Yeah.
Like, he's good. I mean, he doesn't make a ton of mistakes. He certainly played in Neil's offense. I think the issue is that even if you keep Nico, like fans think like, oh, he's been here 3 years. It's not a reset at the position.
Yeah.
But because the system's going to be completely different, it just is. Like, because he's going to have to learn it from scratch. So it doesn't matter that he's been here when the whole offense is different. So
it might mean he doesn't want to come back. Maybe he doesn't want to do that. Maybe he doesn't think he fits Rich Rod, and he was also attached to Neil Brown. And I know that he needed convinced to come back even last year, even though he did, which is credit to him, because he wants to play some football. So if he has to compete with Rich Rod in a system he's not familiar with, depends on who he brings in, he basically got to play. I mean, if he sits another year, he's wasting his career.
Yeah. So that's, even though he's here and he's technically a returner, like, keeping Nico isn't a continuation of anything. It's all going to be a reset.
Okay. Is it a priority to you, though, for a better word, then? Is that a priority that if you're Rich Rod or you're somebody that Rich Rod talks to, that you would say, here's my list, and Nico's on it to somebody that you want to talk to try to bring in and bring back? Or do you say to Rich Rod, look, Nico's good. He's been here a while. Your system's different. He's not great yet. There's a work in progress still. He can compete, but he's already had to be convinced once. If he doesn't want to come back, just move on to the next one. Don't even worry about it. We're not going to have 2 phone calls.
My priority would be, I think what the portal's been open for, this is the 2nd week. Like, guys are making decisions, guys are taking visits. There hasn't been a lot of movement for WVU's front on quarterbacks.
No, they hire a coach, and then the players wanted to play in the bowl game. They kind of didn't have the time. Right.
So, like, the guy from Boston College committed, the guy from
Yeah.
Liberty committed, Penn
Yeah,
State's
Caden
backup.
Stalter, who I was mentioning, from
Penn
Liberty.
State's backup has taken a bunch of visits already. Like, he's going to UCF, and
I'm surprised West Virginia's not trying to bring him over for at least a visit. He has a dual threat ability, and they saw him directly. I know Rich Rod wasn't there, and it's a new staff now. But even the old staff that was bringing in some of these guys and throwing these offers out, I'm surprised they wouldn't have thought that Pribula would be somebody that they at least should get on the books to come in and offer and then let him make a decision. Scott Frost is coming back to UCF2 in the new system. There's money in Orlando, but they haven't been good the last couple of years. If you're choosing between WVU and Rich Rod or Scott Frost and UCF, at worst, that's probably a lateral decision. That you're having to resurrect them too. Yeah. Maybe you think it's a better call to go there, but I would think that if they're offering and bringing you in, West Virginia would look too. And Group of 5 in Tulane right now looks to be the front runner. So it's confusing a little bit why they're not even seemingly going after him. And I've tried to dip into both WVU and PSU sources, and it appears they're not really in the mix yet at all. They could get there, but I don't think you have that ton of time to go. He's going to make a decision soon, I would imagine.
Yeah. So that's like portal quarterbacks are always a crapshoot. Usually the guys that are good are the guys that have played a bunch and have been consistent and have a good track record.
Yeah, you don't like the portal QB.
The guys who move to like reset their career never work out.
That's true.
The guys who move because they lost their starting job never work out, because if they were good enough to start at a Power 4, they would be.
Probably.
The ones that work out, if we talk about Holstein at Pitt, it's these young guys that are blocked, that have talent, and they just need opportunity.
Yeah, he was a redshirt freshman. That's perfect.
Those are the guys that are hard to find because they don't have any tape, and nobody knows about them.
His style of play really fits Rich Rod, by the way. It is too bad. I imagine he wouldn't do that, and that would be one hell of a pluck. And he's coming back to Pitt, obviously. But yeah, you missed that one.
So it's the movement we've seen is these older, experienced, consistent quarterbacks are the guys that are committing places. And someone like Pribula, he's one of these guys that's blocked by Drew Allard that has shown promise, and you would probably want.
Right.
Like you said, there's not been a lot of interest there either. So it's like, at this point where the portal is at, and obviously I don't know every single quarterback that's in the portal.
Yeah, I'm not asking you that. And obviously also once the playoffs done, as teams get eliminated, those players are going to have a chance to dip in if they want to go into the portal. So there will be more players and a greater pool of players. But when you think about it off of what you're saying too, especially at quarterback, any of the players on those teams, for the most part, you figure are probably happy there because their team's winning and they're getting paid and everything's going well. So why would the quarterback on a playoff team, even if he loses in the first round, jump ship to go to WVU? That would be weird. That would be a harder sell, I would think, than to try to get somebody who's either a backup, who's either blocked, or who maybe he's on a bad team but feels like he's good. That's the other option, that maybe he wants to be with a guy like Rich Rod, who is legit a borderline Hall of Fame coach on his overall resume. Maybe there are some people that want to play for him that maybe wouldn't have come for just a regular coach in Neil Brown. But I do think they got to move quicker. They're throwing tons of offers to DBs, a lot of DB offers for Rich Rod to look at, which is great. It's a neat position. But the old staff to this point, and now whatever work Rich Rod is doing, because he was texting even at the game, I'm sure he's doing portal work now, not much quarterback-wise. Very, very little movement, very little visits, like almost nothing. Maybe they're bringing Nico back. For me, Rich Rod has pressure that Neil Brown did not have in year one. We've talked about this before. Rich Rod cannot go 6-6 next year, or this fan base, a lot of the haters of Rich Rod will revolt, and it might get uncomfortable that he may not even want to finish out the deal. And for him and his family, it sucks to say, but that's the reality. The Pitt game is a must-win, not just a regular must-win. He cannot lose it. So he has a lot more pressure in year one, despite McAfee saying, look at year two. And to that end, I don't think Nico is a Big 12 championship quarterback. I think he can win you 7 games and kind of do a Garrett Green thing. But I don't think Rich Rod can do that. I think Rich Rod needs to bring in somebody that he thinks can win now. And if they have all this NIL money that's being reported, I think Rich Rod needs to say to the collective and everybody there, we need a good chunk of this to go to a legit quarterback now. because the position players, I think the skill position players are good enough if you pair them with a legit QB. But, and I'm not saying you got to bring in Pat White, but I just don't think they have that now. I don't think anyone out there is really that guy now. If they're losing out on Salter and Pribula and others, I don't know who they're bringing in. They just got to do something, even if it's not a guy that's going to be there for 4 years. And it's only a 1 year thing. They really have to go for broke, at least for next year, to take a jump and be a good team. But then, as you're saying, that's a very risky thing, because then you're dipping into this portal for a QB every damn year, which I'm sure he doesn't want to do. He's vocally said he doesn't kind of like how that's the case. And that's not what won with him before. It was Pat White ascending and being there and getting the job off an injury and then being there and winning 5 bowl games and being there so long. That journey is almost impossible in this day and age. But at the end of the day, I just don't think Nico is a Big 12 championship quarterback. So I would almost say shoot your shot elsewhere. If you swing and miss elsewhere, then you're probably not going to win anyway. But if you have Nico, I don't see more than a 7-8 win ceiling with Nico. That's just me. Some people really like him and think he can do it. I don't see him as a Rich Rod QB, and I don't think he's to that level, because he's more of a game manager in the games he's won. Rich Rod's not a game manager guy. Like, he wants to go fast, high tempo, and go for broke, not just manage the game and win 16-13. Those are Nico wins to me.
Yeah, he would have to take a big jump, which I think would be hard when
you're learning a new offense,
like a whole new system. But I mean, like Nico we've seen he has a great arm. He runs decent. But yeah, I he would have to take like a pretty big jump, like the kind of jump they wanted Garrett to make this year. Nico would have to do that with quite a bit less experience and learning a new offense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I and this is me personally, and obviously I don't have the same sensibilities as a college football coach, but like,
right.
If I'm looking out at the portal and I'm like, all these guys I'm looking at only have like practice film, or they've never played. Like Nico's gone into big pressure situations on the road.
Yeah.
In won games, and like that's worth something.
With his family there at Arizona, he's faced pressure and won. Yeah.
Like maybe you're saying, Mike, like, instead of going out and getting some guy who's going to be here for 1 year, maybe we stick with Nico because we kind of know what his floor is, and then if he doesn't work out, then we'll go in the portal next year anyway. So but
that's a risk for Nico to sell him on, though, because then he's really running out of eligibility. If I was him, I don't know if I'd even want to do this.
Yeah. That's if I was Nico, I would probably go to Rich Rod and say, you got to pretty much guarantee I'm going to compete for the starting job. Like, I don't care if you bring a guy in, but you can't
at least be the 1A.
But like, don't promise it to whoever you're going to bring in.
Right.
And if Rich Rod doesn't commit to that, I would go in the portal and just see. I would almost go in the portal just to see anyway if I'm Nico.
Yeah.
Because like you're saying, I mean, he has to play at this point. He's not as young as he used to be. None of us are. But
right.
But he's I would almost go in anyway.
We've all aged probably 6 years in 1 year.
But just to like see who's out there and see maybe somebody wants to reach out and guarantee me a starting job, or something like that. But that's I'm sure that's a conversation him and Rich Rod maybe have already had,
and his dad and his
going to
camp. And I mean, I'm not saying anything that's would make even the family mad. His dad is very involved, as I would be with the son in this situation. So all of them, I'm sure, are meeting and discussing this. It's harder because you don't have an O coordinator, you don't have a QB coach. You're having to make decisions. I mean, Rich Rod is there, but the guy he's working with to get to the level you're saying he has to be is not really going to be Rich Rod. I mean, Rich Rod's calling plays, so it's more Rich Rod than it maybe would be other coaches. But that quarterback and the QB coach are really married together. They're in the meetings by themselves a lot, watching film, while Rich Rod's chewing out the defense. He's not with you 24/7, 365. He's with you maybe 16 of the 24 hours. So the other time with Tyler Allen or whoever it is, and likely a new guy. So something to think about. And really, again, I say this to people all the time because there's controversy with even Pribula. There's some Penn State fans just saying, why would you want to go to a bad team and we could win a title? And even people that aren't mad about the timing because they know the portal's open right now and he has to look elsewhere. As you said, Aller's blocking him. But the simple part of it is playing. If you're an athlete worth a damn that wants to eventually make some money doing this, or even be somebody that cares about their college career, which obviously you can make money in college, playing on a bad team or playing on a group of 5 team, like maybe Nico fits more at a group of 5 level where he can really throw up numbers and play, playing at a lower level or even at a team that doesn't win a title but is a team that is yours and you can play is better than riding the bench, getting 3 plays a year, never playing, and getting a charity ring on a team that wins a national title. That is just not better for you as a player. The only thing that might be better is 30 years from now, you can show your kid your ring. And when the kid says, tell me some moments and highlights you'd had during that year 25 years ago, you're going to say, well, this one play here, and then I never played again. Like, or in the FCS game that no one cares about. Like, just playing is better than not playing. It's simply put. Nico got to freaking play. And maybe there won't be any. I think at minimum, Rich Rod will be able to offer him a competition because all the star transfers are mostly committed now. But I don't think he fits the system enough that I do think that even a Wilkins, who was recruited by Brown, there's a chance Rich Rod could be impressed by a dual threat like that and think that that's a better option than Nico. I'm not saying he'd be the starter or that would even be good, but I just do not think Nico is fast enough to impress Rich Rod because he's being serious on this one thing that we're sure of. He doesn't want to see offensive linemen hold hands. He wants to run and do a high tempo, meaning you're not going to have time to continuously huddle and get plays together and talk to back and forth with the coach and, do this. And that was a lot of that from Nico in those wins. It feels like it's taking an hour and a half to get the play going. Rich Rod does not want to do that. I don't think Nico fits Rich Rod. There are people that think he really, really does. But at the very least, I don't think Nico's done enough to be handed the job.
Oh, yeah.
Like there are some that are really high Nico guys that think he deserves to start this year one with Rich Rod, especially if they can't get a star quarterback. That's some BS. I mean, Rich Rod has pressure to win. Nobody deserves shit in this new era. Like no one deserves nothing. I'm sorry. That's just the reality of the situation. It's not their fault Brown got fired, but there's no one getting handed anything. I mean, that would even go with Clement as the number 1 wide receiver. He doesn't deserve to be the wide receiver 1. He got to show it.
Yeah. I mean, Nico couldn't even outplay Garrett, and Garrett regressed this year. So it's, outside of that Arizona game, which was so good, like Cincinnati was fine. Enough
they win with him, right? Like if Richard watches some Arizona film, he might like it, but outside of that.
But no, I mean you're right. Yeah, I mean that's all. That's all stuff that's in consideration when you have, your quarterback that's been a starter 2 years graduating, and his backups played sparingly, and you got a new coach coming in.
Yeah, I mean the only thing that sucks about this a little bit, I guess, for timing for WVU and even Rich Rod there, especially with a year with pressure. Obviously, as we're saying, Garrett Green regressed and was a big part of why Brown got fired. In the 2023 Green's great. The 2024 Green is just not nearly good enough. There's a chance and a legit argument that is now irrelevant that Green would have fit more into a Rich Rod system. And if Rich Rod was there with Green, that Rich Rod could be convinced to try to do the Green thing because he is fast enough. He is. That's an argument, but unfortunately it's irrelevant because he doesn't have eligibility. So it can't happen. So Rich Rod deciding between Nico or recruits that have 0 playing time or going to the portal. That is it. And he doesn't have time to mess around. I don't think he can sit there a year from now and say, well, our quarterback regressed, so we had a funky year, but we'll go get him next year. Not after what we had with Pat McAfee in the Coliseum. I mean, I'm not forgetting, as you even said, you're going to get, I didn't even get to ask you since then, but we talked about it in the show before as we'll kind of round things out now with football talk here, this edition of Mountaineer Report, that we're going to go off the expectations of whatever the coach sets to be really fair because it is year one, even though obviously there's a lot of hype and a big storyline with Rich Rod coming back. Rich Rod said, and I quote, you can win national championship at West Virginia. He said, we're going to win. He said, we're going to win right away. He said that if you don't want to win and you're not fast enough and you're not in shape enough, you're literally not going to play. He said that 2 starters, including looking at Nico in his eyes, what he said tells me 6-6 is not acceptable next year. And if that's the best he can get out of Nico, he can't have him. He put a lot of big words out there. Every time he talks, he says this. He's put it all out in the universe. So he's adding more to the pressure. Yeah. I would think.
Yeah, I mean, he clearly wants the excitement, right? He and the fan base 100%. Is excited.
100%.
And you're right. And that's what I said last time was like he's what like the reasonable expectation that we should expect is whatever he says, and he put it out there. So now this is what he's going to get held to, just like Big 12 championship is what Neil was held to this year because that's what he said.
That's what he said.
So that's and you're right. It is kind of funny. McAfee's the one trying to walk it back a little bit. Like, well, year 2 is going to be really good. Well, it's like. Rich Rod says we're going to win right now.
And not only that, before he was even hired, McAfee always said, well, compare it to Kirk Cignetti. He could do it for 1 year. Rich Rod's better than him. Why can't he do it? So why are you waiting 2 years now for Rich Rod when you didn't have to do it with Kirk Cignetti? Obviously, a lot of money came in for Kirk Cignetti, and that maybe we'll see where the money works out for WVU. But yeah, the pressure's there. I'm not saying you got to go ahead and win a national title in year 1. Obviously, that would be insane. And I'm not even saying Big 12 title. But Ren Baker hates win bars, but I'm going to repeat it again as we end that show. I anything shy of 8 wins, especially with an easier schedule and a guarantee 2 wins and out of conference at minimum, even if you lose the pit game, because you're looking at a group of 5 and RMU, which is at least one of those, and you can't lose the group of 5 game, even though they can be competitive. I mean, you're going to start 2-1, even if you lose the pit. If you beat Pitt at home, then you're 3-0. Then you only need 5 more wins to get to the 8 I'm talking about. I mean, so you know what I mean? Like, at that point, you should be. That's not an insane bar. That would not get you to Dallas, I don't think. But 7 at the worst. I mean, certainly cannot be 6-6 again. And if it's 7, you got to win the bowl, like pretty hands down. Even 8, maybe. You got to show something that I mean, you almost got to flirt with AP ranks, and you got to go into 2026. With people having words on shows that is not just McAfee, in which they say, look out for the Mountaineers. They should be a ranked team. They're a dark horse Big 12 title contender. That's what should be said. If that is not said, then I do think the hype needs to calm down, and that maybe this tenure is not going to be successful. This tenure cannot continuously just go get bowl game appearances. There has to be more, which is what the hype train of Rich Rod is saying. So we will see, but a lot of this depends on if it's the QB situation that fits there. And I think if it's Nico, right now, if I think if it's Nico, I don't see more than 7-8 wins. I mean, wouldn't even be shocked if it's less than that. I don't think Nico fits Rich Rod personally. Apparently that's a hot take, but we will see, because maybe I'll get proven wrong, and maybe he is an accurate passer. He does have a cannon for an arm, and he does not make the mistakes. I don't see him as enough of a dual threat, even though he can move a little bit, to work with Rich Rod when there are other dual threats out there. But, quarterbacks that really would salivate over with Rich Rod, like a Jalen Daniels, for example, he's going back to Kansas again. Like, I don't know who that guy is.
Yeah.
So maybe that guy's not even out there, but a lot of this hinges on what happens with the QB position, to say the very least. That'll do it for this edition of the show. Cody Nespor, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report. Like, subscribe, download, find us everywhere you get your podcast, and of course here on YouTube, and find our coverage of all of Mountaineer athletics at WV Sports Now.